My name is Dora Stewart, and for most of my life, I was the sister who quietly blended into the background. At least, that's the image my family preferred. The quiet one, the one who didn't achieve much, the single one, the one who left home early and, in their opinion, never amounted to anything. So when I entered the banquet hall, silently, dressed in understated civilian black, without any insignia of rank, they barely noticed me. My mother gave a brief nod. My father looked past me, and Clara, my younger sister, let out a soft laugh. "You came," she said with a smirk. "Still working at that records office or something?" The table gave a polite chuckle. I smiled and said nothing. I wasn't there to prove anything to anyone. The event wasn't about me. It was Clara's military recognition banquet. She had been promoted, and the family was beaming, ready to bask in her glow. And then it happened. Just before the keynote speaker began, a tall, decorated officer entered the room. A hush fell as he surveyed the tables and then, suddenly, stopped when he saw me. He strode forward, posture erect, his expression shifting to something unreadable. And in front of my entire family and Clara's unit, he raised his hand and saluted me. Not her, but me. The room froze. Clara did too. I didn't say a word. I just returned the gesture, because some reputations don't need defending. They announce themselves. Growing up in the Stewart household meant two things. You followed the script, and you never questioned the lead actress, my younger sister, Clara. From the moment she learned to walk, Clara had every spotlight on her. She was bold, loud, with an innate charm, the kind of child who corrected adults without batting an eye and was still praised for her leadership potential. My parents melted. "This one's going places," my father would say, ruffling her hair, while I stood by forgotten, holding a book I'd finished in 2 hours. In high school, Clara was captain of 3 sports teams, class president, and already openly talking about her dream of joining the military. My parents floated like helium balloons every time she entered a room. Meanwhile, I kept my head down, got excellent grades, and spent hours in the library reading about foreign policy and military strategy, subjects I loved, but never spoke about at the dinner table. No one ever asked. When I turned 18, I left. No fanfare, no packed lunches or hidden letters in my bag, just a silent, exhausted agreement between me and my parents. I would no longer disrupt their narrative. Clara went to a prestigious military academy, on a full scholarship, of course. She'd send photos in uniform, medals pinned to her chest, beaming. My mother framed everyone and created a gallery wall titled "Service and Sacrifice." My name wasn't on it. What they didn't know, what they never bothered to ask, was that I had also enlisted quietly. I didn't flaunt it like Clara. I entered a different program, more technical, less visible. I didn't want applause. I wanted purpose. I remember one holiday years ago when I briefly came home for my father's birthday. I had already completed an overseas assignment. Nothing dramatic, just a joint intelligence designation, but I knew it was best not to bring it up. Clara was visiting too. She had just made lieutenant. At dinner, when I mentioned I was working in Washington, she laughed and said, "Doing what?" "Filing papers." The whole table erupted in laughter. Even my father chuckled. I smiled and nodded. I let them think what made them comfortable. That night, I returned to my apartment near Washington, D.C., and unpacked the encrypted laptop given to me by the National Security Center. I worked on a report that would be delivered directly to the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the morning. But Clara was who they saw, who they quoted, who looked and played the part brilliantly. And perhaps that's what hurt me the most. Not that they admired her, but that they had no interest in even wondering who I truly was. Not once did my mother ask, "What do you really do, Dora?" Not once did my father say, "I'm proud of you." It was easier for them to believe I was a background character. But the funny thing about background characters is sometimes we're the ones holding the whole scene together. I didn't set out to disappear from my family. But over time, it became easier to live a life where I didn't have to explain myself to people who were never listening. While Clara followed the expected milestones, officer school, first assignment, I charted a different course. I joined military intelligence. Not the flashy kind you see in movies. Mine was the slow, methodical, mind-numbing intelligence that required fluency in 3 dialects, an iron memory, and a tolerance for gray areas. My work was invisible by design. I didn't wear ribbons or rank. I didn't post on Facebook in uniform. What I did required silence, legal, moral, and psychological. But I was good at it, better than I expected. I started in signals intelligence, monitoring encrypted conversations, running decryption routines. It wasn't glamorous, but I saw patterns no one else did. My team began to rack up small victories, intercepts that saved supply lines, reports that warned of ambushes before they happened. By 30, I had moved through 5 postings and received 2 commendations I couldn't talk about. Eventually, I was assigned to a policy research and analysis organization within the Department of Defense, advising on geopolitical threats and long-term strategic planning. My official title was deliberately vague, Civilian Defense Consultant. It was simpler that way. I worked behind closed doors, sometimes alongside generals, sometimes in conference rooms where my security clearance outranked the men in uniform beside me. Once, I rewrote a logistics protocol that saved over $15 million in projected annual losses. But when I told my mother I worked in defense analysis, she replied, "So, like Excel?" There were moments I considered correcting her. Moments I imagined walking into a family dinner and telling them everything. Where I'd been, what I'd done, the things I'd seen that would keep her awake for weeks. But then I'd look at her or my father or Clara, so completely confident in their version of me, and I'd stop. It wasn't pride that kept me silent. It was detachment. I had stopped needing their approval. The same way you stop needing a toy when you realize it never really worked. You move on, you grow, you outgrow the old need. The last time I saw Clara before the banquet, she was on leave. I was grabbing a coffee in Washington, D.C., fresh out of a classified meeting that had run long. She spotted me across the coffee shop, waved me over, and sat with me as if we were equals, 2 sisters catching up. Within 5 minutes, she was recounting her latest field exercise, boasting about how she corrected a commanding officer's decision in a simulation. "He was so impressed," she said. "He told me I'd be a major in no time." I nodded, offering a polite smile. Then she leaned in, her voice lower, as if telling me a secret. "You should think about going back to school or something. I mean, you're smart. I'm sure you could work in base administration." I didn't flinch. I didn't speak. I just took my coffee and said, "Thanks, Clara. I'll keep that in mind." She meant to be kind. That was the worst part. She wasn't being cruel. She genuinely thought she was offering me a leg up, from the life she imagined I had to one she believed was finally respectable. That moment sealed everything for me. They not only never asked who I was, they constructed an entire fantasy of who I wasn't and lived inside it as if it were gospel. So when the invitation arrived months later, for her promotion banquet, I knew what to expect. But I went anyway, not to prove anything, just to witness for myself how far one could ascend in their own world without ever realizing they were orbiting someone else entirely. The invitation came in the mail, inside a floral, gold-embossed envelope. I almost mistook it for a wedding announcement. "You are cordially invited to the promotion banquet honoring First Lieutenant Clara Stewart." It listed the venue, a formal hall near the base where she was stationed, and noted the presence of several high-ranking officers. Dress code: formal civilian or full-dress uniform. There was a handwritten note from my mother at the bottom. "If you come, please don't draw attention." This is Clara's moment. I stared at that sentence for a long time. It wasn't surprising. My parents had always been delicate about public image. When Clara achieved something, it was a family celebration. When I did, it was a private milestone. We didn't talk about my promotions. We didn't hang certificates on the wall. My life, to them, was something best left off the record. I considered not going. No one would miss me after all. But something in the handwriting, so measured, so familiar, squeezed my chest. And maybe I was tired. Tired of being reduced to an absence. Tired of letting their silence define me. So I booked a flight. I didn't bring my uniform. I brought a black dress, simple, long-sleeved, respectful. No insignia, no hint of affiliation. Just a guest, a shadow at the edge of the room. When I arrived at the hall, the place was buzzing. Men and women in military dress clustered at tables, their uniforms adorned with ribbons and badges, back straight, posture trained. There were tables with family, others with senior officers. I spotted my parents immediately. My father in his dated sport coat, my mother in a navy blue dress that still had the department store tag tucked under her shawl. Clara was in the center of it all, laughing with her colleagues. She looked great, confident, proud. She always had a stage presence. When she saw me approaching, something in her smile tightened. "You came," she said a little too loudly. There was a pause. Then, without missing a beat, she added, "Everyone, this is my sister, Dora. She, works in administration, I think, civilian sector, right?" A few people nodded vaguely. One of the officers offered a strained smile. Someone was already turning back to Clara to hear a field story. I smiled and said nothing. My mother pulled out the chair next to her, but Clara intercepted with a quick, "Maybe at the family table, Mom. I have some of my team sitting here." Her tone was light. Her eyes were not. I walked to the furthest table, sat in a corner. The room was warm, the air thick with aftershave and starch. Glasses clinked. Laughter echoed off the high ceilings. They weren't cruel. Not directly. No one insulted me to my face. But there's a kind of silence that cuts deeper than any insult. The kind that edits you out of your own lineage. Clara was called to speak. Her voice rang out clear and confident as she thanked her officers, her mentors, our parents. There was applause, toasts, smiles all around. I raised my glass and drank in silence. No one asked me what I did. No one wondered why I looked familiar to two of the visiting officers who looked at me with furrowed brows but didn't speak. They presumed I was nothing, a civilian, a bureaucrat, a gap filler. And I let them. Because if there's one thing I learned working in intelligence, it's this: the less they see you coming, the harder they flinch when the truth arrives. After Clara's speech, the room shifted into a soft celebration. Waiters brought out dinner, steak or chicken artfully plated, and I watched from my quiet corner as people leaned in to chat, fawn, gossip. Clara moved from table to table like a seasoned diplomat. She knew how to balance praise and self-deprecation, how to make every small anecdote sound like a war story. She was magnetic. My parents followed her, beaming with pride, introducing themselves to anyone who would listen. Yes, we're her parents. Clara was always driven. We knew she'd lead something since she was 5. No one mentioned me, which was fine. I didn't come to be mentioned. I came to remember why I had stopped inviting myself to this version of family. Somewhere between dessert and the final toast, I noticed a shift in the atmosphere. The hum died down. The back doors opened, and a tall man walked in. I recognized him instantly. Lieutenant General Torres, 3 stars, former chief of military operations and strategy. He had retired just under a year ago, but still carried the weight of command in his presence. His walk was calm, calculated, no wasted movements. The room felt him before they even saw him. Whispers started. Someone murmured, "Why is he here?" He scanned the room, shaking a few hands, exchanging brief words. But then he stopped. His eyes locked on me. Not a flicker of uncertainty. No hesitation. His expression changed only slightly, shoulders pulling back, chin lifting with familiarity. And then, before a room full of military bigwigs, family and egos, he walked directly toward me. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Forks hovered over plates. Clara, halfway through another story at her table, turned her head. Lieutenant General Torres stopped directly in front of me, looked me in the eye, and offered a slow, crisp salute. "Ma'am," he said, "it's an honor. I wasn't told you'd be here." I rose instinctively, years of training reigniting in my spine. I returned the salute, clear and firm. "I wasn't sure I'd make it, sir." He smiled, a genuine one. "Glad you did." Someone nearby whispered, "Who is she?" Another voice, "Wait." "Stewart. Dora Stewart." And then a ripple. A recognition like water hitting glass. Because in circles they didn't talk about at family dinners, my name carried weight. Not publicly, not on medals or press releases, but in operations that had quietly shifted entire outcomes. General Torres extended his hand. "Your work on Project Phoenix saved lives." I never got a chance to thank you. I shook his hand. "You just did." Behind him, Clara was frozen. Her smile wavered. My parents blinked, uncertain of what they were seeing. A junior officer nearby, one who had chuckled at Clara's story earlier, straightened, his eyes darting between us. "You're that Stewart?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because the truth had arrived. Not shouted, not forced, just recognized. And the room, so loud with certainties moments ago, now felt very, very quiet. There are moments in life when the world doesn't explode. It just pauses. No applause, no gasps, just a long, still silence that says everything. After General Torres returned to his seat, the room didn't pick up where it left off. It couldn't. Something had shifted. The story they all thought they knew had cracked, and the pieces no longer fit. Clara sat in her chair, her face unreadable. Her hands, usually animated, were now still in her lap. I caught her looking at Dad, who offered a weak smile. Our mother looked down at her napkin, folding the corner with nervous precision. It wasn't embarrassment on their faces. It was confusion, the kind that comes when you realize you've misunderstood someone for so long. The correction feels like a foreign language. People approached me silently, respectfully. Some shook my hand, others just nodded. No one asked for details. They didn't need to. The general's salute had spoken louder than any resume could. Clara came last. She stopped by my chair, wine glass in hand, and stared at me for a long time. "You never said," she whispered. I looked at her. "You never asked." She blinked, as if that answer had dislodged something. For a second, I saw the girl she used to be, full of fire and ambition, but never purposefully cruel, just oblivious, untaught. "I didn't know," she said softer now. "No," I replied. "You didn't want to know." I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I just wanted her to see that silence doesn't always mean absence. That humility isn't invisibility. That sometimes the strongest people in the room are the ones who never needed to be seen. And for the first time in years, she didn't have a clever retort. She just nodded, backed away, and let the truth settle where it belonged. I left the banquet unceremoniously. No fanfare, no final glances, just the steady sound of my heels echoing on the polished marble as I walked out. Not in defeat, not in triumph, just in clarity. I didn't need to stay for explanations or apologies. What needed to be seen had already unfolded, clean and crisp like a truth cutting through fabric. The air outside was cold, but calm, the kind of cold that clears the noise from your head. I took a deep breath and let it ground me. At home, I moved through the darkness by instinct. No lights, no noise, just the silence, my oldest companion. I opened the hall closet and reached behind the coats where my uniform waited in its garment bag. I hadn't touched it in years. I unzipped the bag slowly, as if unsealing a memory. My dress uniform was exactly as I'd left it. Sharp creases, ribbons in place, the nameplate, Stewart. No rank was needed. The name had gained enough weight on its own. That uniform had been in rooms most people never imagined, before men who gave orders with their eyes. It had carried my voice into places where lives hung in the balance on data, instinct, and time, measured in seconds. But I never brought it to family dinners. I never corrected Clara when she talked over me, never interrupted my parents when they changed the subject. I let them keep their version of me, not because I believed it, but because it cost less to let them be wrong than to demand that they grow. But that night, Torres's salute did what years of silence couldn't. It shifted the axis. They didn't ask questions afterward. They didn't need to. They just sat with the truth. They had spent years narrating a story where I was absent. Now, they will spend the rest of their lives knowing I was never absent. I just was never where they expected me to be. I didn't need their validation. I never needed their permission because I was never trying to grab the spotlight. I was the reason the spotlight had a stage to shine on. Thank you for listening to Dora's story. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share to support us in bringing more inspiring stories, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new releases. See you in the next video.